In 1993, three engineers sat in a Denny's booth in San Jose because they had no office. They had no funding, no product, and one of them, Jensen Huang, was still working at a chip company by day. They wrote a business plan on a napkin. 30 years later, that company would become worth more than Google and Amazon combined. This is the story of how NVIDIA almost died twice before it became the most important company on Earth. The idea was simple: build chips just for 3D graphics, mainly video games. In the 90s, that sounded like a toy business, not a serious one. Investors were skeptical, but Jensen bet everything on one belief: that graphics processing was fundamentally different from regular computing and deserved its own specialized chip. The first near-death moment came almost immediately. NVIDIA's first product, the NV1, was a commercial failure, built on a technical approach the rest of the industry rejected. By 1996, the company had roughly enough cash for a few more weeks of payroll. Jensen later said he thought about failure daily, not as fear, but as fuel. Instead of quitting, the team made a radical decision: abandon their own custom approach and rebuild around the industry-standard Microsoft DirectX architecture. That gamble produced the Revo 128 in 1997, which sold over 1 million units in 4 months and pulled the company back from the edge. In 1999, NVIDIA coined a term the whole industry would later adopt: the GPU, graphics processing unit. The GeForce 256 was marketed as the world's first true GPU. It wasn't just marketing. It represented a real shift, moving graphics calculations off the main processor onto dedicated, parallel hardware. For the next decade, NVIDIA fought a brutal, unglamorous war against 3DFX, ATI, and later AMD, just to stay the top graphics card maker for gamers. It won that war, but by the mid-2000s, gaming graphics was a mature, low-growth market. Wall Street saw NVIDIA as a solid, boring hardware company. Jensen saw something else. In 2006 came the second big bet, and it looked insane at the time. NVIDIA launched CUDA, a platform letting ordinary programmers use GPUs for general computing, not just graphics. Building it cost billions in R&D over the following years, with almost no revenue to show for it. Investors were furious. Some called it a waste of shareholder money. For nearly a decade, CUDA was a bet that didn't pay off in any obvious way. NVIDIA's stock languished through the early 2010s while the company kept funding software nobody outside a few research labs used. Jensen kept saying the same thing in earnings calls: "This is a 10-year bet, not a 10-quarter one." Then, in 2012, something happened in an unrelated field. A University of Toronto team trained a neural network called AlexNet for an image recognition contest, using NVIDIA GPUs instead of regular processors. It crushed the competition so decisively that AI researchers everywhere took notice. CUDA, that reckless bet, turned out to be exactly what deep learning needed. Even then, the shift was gradual. Through the mid-2010s, NVIDIA quietly became the default hardware for AI research. One lab, one university, one startup at a time, while most of Wall Street still filed it under gaming stock. The company was patiently building the exact tool an entire industry didn't know it would need. Then came November 2022 and ChatGPT. Within months, every major tech company on Earth wanted to train and run massive AI models. And there was only one company whose chips and decade-old software platform could actually do it at scale. Demand for NVIDIA's data center GPUs went vertical almost overnight. The numbers that followed were almost absurd. NVIDIA's data center revenue, which had been a modest side business for years, exploded past its gaming business within about 18 months. The company that investors once called reckless for funding CUDA was suddenly the only supplier who could meet global AI demand. By 2024, NVIDIA became the first chipmaker to cross a $3 trillion valuation, at times trading places with Apple and Microsoft as the world's most valuable public company. The stock that had languished for a decade during the CUDA years had, by then, risen well over 100-fold from its 2010s lows. Here's the part that gets missed in the hype. NVIDIA's dominance today isn't really about having faster chips than everyone else, though it does. It's that CUDA, the software layer built during those wasted years, now has almost 20 years of tools, libraries, and trained developers built on top of it. Rivals can copy the hardware. Copying 2 decades of software lock-in is much harder. Of course, dominance this total invites challengers. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta are all now building their own custom AI chips specifically to reduce dependence on NVIDIA. AMD is chasing the data center GPU market hard. None have matched CUDA's ecosystem yet, but all of them are trying, with essentially unlimited budgets. There's also real risk baked into the story. NVIDIA still relies almost entirely on TSMC in Taiwan to actually manufacture its chips, the same geopolitical choke point that worries the rest of the industry. And a company this dependent on one boom cycle, AI infrastructure spending, is also exposed if that spending ever slows sharply. What strikes me most about this story isn't the trillion-dollar valuation, it's the timeline. 17 years passed between NVIDIA launching CUDA in 2006 and the world actually needing it at scale after ChatGPT in 2022. For almost the entire time in between, the smart money thought Jensen Huang had made a mistake. That's really the lesson underneath the numbers. NVIDIA didn't get lucky with AI. It spent nearly 2 decades and 2 near-death experiences building a general-purpose parallel computing platform on a hunch that graphics chips were good for more than graphics. When the use case finally arrived, everyone else had to catch up from zero. So next time you hear, NVIDIA is just lucky to be in AI at the right time, remember the Denny's booth, the near bankruptcy in 1996, and the decade of investors calling CUDA a waste of money. Being ready for a moment nobody else saw coming rarely looks like luck while it's happening. It usually just looks like a bad bet, until it isn't. If this changed how you see NVIDIA's story, subscribe. Tech Battoo breaks down the tech giants like this every week. No hype, just the real story. And I'm curious, do you think today's AI chip challengers, Google, Amazon, AMD, can actually catch up? Or is CUDA's head start too big now? Tell me in the comments.